leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat your ass. I will eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat you. I will eat your ass. I'll barbecue your ass flat. I will cook your ass up so fast, and I'll tell them, oh, I killed a cow out back, baby. You think Christ would eat somebody? He would never do that. I will. I'm ready to hang them up, gut them and skin them and chop them up. You know what? I'm ready. I will eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat your ass. I will eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat you. I will eat your ass. I will eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat your ass. I will eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat you. I will eat your ass. That's why I want the globalists.
So I was thinking for the intro, I wanted to use the song that you did with Alex Jones. To I'll eat your leftist ass.
Eat your leftist ass. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Can I get permission on that?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Please. Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
That one. We'll talk about. Well, we'll leave that one in.
Yeah. Why don't you ask me? I can tell you.
Yeah. For that one, did you? Because you've only done like quite a couple. I've seen like sort of these remix ones of, manipulating kind of what someone is saying into like a song.
Yeah. I was inspired originally, like back in the day, by like the Gregory brothers, who famously did like "Hide Your Wife," they like songify and like auto tune, and like years ago, I like would try to do that, sort of mesmerized by how they did it, and never quite was able to. But like I've definitely like found my own groove of just more of like a straight remix where I like just find things that like people in the news say. And then, but Alex Jones, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess probably, is like just really good for it. Like, because his cadence and the way he shouts and the things he says are just like perfectly. And so, but then my wife is constantly like, dude, why are you doing that? Like, you're helping him, you're like helping him spread his message. And I will say, like, that is one of my consistently most viewed on YouTube. Things sort of go in cycles, and like for the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 months, that song just like gets a lot of YouTube views and a lot of YouTube comments, and the comments are very evenly split between people who are like, oh my god, look at this buffoon, what an idiot, or like leftist people who are like, haha, eat my leftist ass, Alex Jones. And then people are like, yeah, Alex Jones, he's hilarious. I love this guy. He's a national treasure. It should be more Alex Jones. I love Alex. And so I'm like, oh man, like So my wife is right in a sense of like, I'm really just helping him. And I will say, I hear then also people from Alex Jones like that love him that be like, oh yeah, they play your remix on Alex Jones's show all the time. Like they just like lead into segments with it, they lead out of segments with it. There's one other story about this, which is I had this like longtime fan of SongADAO, and I'm talking like I've been doing this for 14 years. I'm talking like from the beginning, 2009. Commissioned many songs from me for his kids. His kids became fans. He was like a very serious head. I looked on Patreon when what went down, which we'll get into. He had spent something like $600 on me over the course. But he was a huge Alex Jones fan, just like the biggest Alex Jones fan. And I don't know how he could go so long being my fan. And he would often, he would occasionally be like, oh, Jonathan, I hate your leftist politics or whatever. And then when I made this Alex Jones thing, making fun of Alex Jones, but then other people loved it. He was like, that's the last straw, Jonathan. I love you so much, but I can't follow you anymore. I'm canceling my Patreon. This is it. And his kids wrote to me later. They're like, we're really sorry. Like he's anyway. So that's my and then I wrote a song about that guy, about my fan, called You Chose Alex Jones. Like, you chose Alex Jones over me. That's fine. You chose Alex Jones. That's what you chose. Yeah.
So then are his kids, I mean, is it sort of like that standard, like, oh, my dad's like kind of this annoying conservative and we
Yes.
can't really get through to him?
Yes, exactly. And what's wild about it, is that if you think about it, like, I think they were, I'm going to make these numbers up, but it's something like this, where they were like 6 and 7 when when he first became a fan of mine, right? And now 14 years later, they're like young adults. And so they've sort of grown up with me, like they've grown up with Jonathan Mann in the background or whatever. And so, yeah, they're like constantly apologizing, like,
Wow, that's great.
he's a veteran. That's the main thing I know about him is he's a veteran.
Right.
And he's very into Alex Jones.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes I don't, I guess I can't really like fully grasp why like an Alex Jones fan likes the parodies of Alex Jones so much.
Yeah.
It seems to come from, I don't know, like a very nihilistic like
Yes.
worldview. Just like they kind of just enjoy the entertainment factor of it, and then just touching on some sort of like, things that they're familiar with every once in a while makes them feel like they're doing politics, I guess.
Right. My guess is that, like, yeah, there's like a couple different kind of Alex Jones fans, right? Like, I think like this guy Kevin, my fan, was like, I think probably seems to really subscribe to like Alex's Jones nascent, whatever you want to call it, ideology. And then I do think there's a lot of people who, like, listen to him like they would you know Howard Stern or something. It's just like pure entertainment. It's just like, oh, this
Right.
guy is hilarious. He says the wackiest things. And those are the people
Right.
that I think like the songs, because they're like, the song, the song is basically, unfortunately, and this is my wife's point, is taking the same view as them. It's like, ultimately, it's like, look at this wacky guy and his wacky things that he says. But, ultimately, at the end of the day, Alex Jones is a fucking dangerous dude with some really like vile, dangerous ideas, and like giving him any oxygen is the wrong idea. That's my wife's point, and she's correct about that, I would say, ultimately.
And yeah, but I feel like, I don't know, at least I haven't really come across Alex Jones, like, or at least freaking out about Alex Jones as I did, like, I don't know, in 2016, 2015, right. Like during that time. Like now it feels like it's sort of, I have no idea I have no idea if even that the show is still going on.
Yeah. I don't know either. Well, he got deplatformed, right?
Right.
Which is, I think, a case of where, like, it worked. Like people joke about getting canceled, but you don't hear about him as much anymore. And I think he's not on YouTube. Did he get deplatformed from a bunch of podcast things? I think he might have. Like Apple, I think he's not on. You think you can't find him on like Apple Podcasts or like and things like that. So that's, it's just an RSS feed, so you can always just get the RSS feed another way. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe for people in case they have been listening and haven't figured it out yet, I have today Jonathan Mann, also known as SongADAO Mann, and it's pretty straightforward. He's been doing a new song every day for now, I think you said 14 years.
Yeah, I'm in my 14th year, so it'll be 14 years complete at the end of this year. Yeah.
Yeah. And Jonathan, of course, has also been working on some pretty interesting projects like the SongADAO Co-op or SongADAO NFT project, in which he's sort of tokenized all the different songs that he's done over the years into something that you can collect on the blockchain. And in doing so, you can kind of become a part of this larger organizational structure. But we'll get into that, I think, as we go along. But maybe if you want to, because I'm sure everybody will be curious to know, and I know you've talked about it before and everyone asks you this, but how did SongADAO start?
Yeah. So SongADAO began in 2009, basically on a whim. And January 1st of 2009, I planned to just start writing a song a day for a month. That was the goal. And I mean, if you can imagine, like back then, like, I started on Tumblr, which gives you an idea of like of like where the web was at that point. And then
I think
after
the
a few,
YouTube had like just started around that time. I think
yeah,
if I remember
YouTube,
right.
Tumblr I think was 2007 if I'm right, and YouTube was 2005. So it was like all very
Okay. Yeah.
new still. Uh, and then a few days after that, I was like, oh, I'll just start adding video to it. So for the month of January 2009, I wrote a song a day for that month, posting them starting on Tumblr and then moving to YouTube. And then at the end of the month, I had actually had like one song go viral, and which was also a sort of a relatively new phenomenon at the time. That word viral, I think, had really just been coined, and so it, and that had been happening in different ways on the internet with like email chains and things, but like there was suddenly this new way for it to happen. Uh, and so then I decided to keep going for a year, and I went for all of 2009. And then I was sort of at this crossroads at the end of 2009 where it's like I was having a good time and I was still wanting to do it. But it's like a year is sort of a really good, like, easy to digest. Like, okay, you did it for a year, but like once you cross that threshold, it's like, all right, then how long am I going to go for? And basically at that point, it became more or less indefinite. There have been a few times throughout the last 14 years or whatever where I've like considered stopping, but like never really seriously. And so at this point, it's this ongoing thing that I plan to do as long as I possibly can.
Right. Yeah. There are like two things in my life that like makes me resonate with that story so much. Is
Yeah.
one is that I became a vegetarian like I don't know a few years ago, like for a New Year's resolution. And I was like, all right, for a year, I'm gonna try eating no meat.
Yeah.
And then like by the end of the year, I was like, well, I guess I might as well keep going. And I
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
haven't stopped.
I did a year, so yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was like, it wasn't that bad, so I guess I'll keep going. And then, I mean, also with like my blog and podcast, like I started off with just being like, okay, I'm gonna make something every Sunday, and I told people when I first started, like, I'm going to make something every Sunday, and it put like a lot of social pressure on myself to do it.
Yep.
And now I've like, yeah, not stopped, I guess more or less.
Yeah, they say that like that social pressure is like is a good way to like keep yourself honest, like announce your project and then like then you'll
Yeah,
have to do it.
I think for me, what's even I don't know if I really look back at it, I'm like, I bet there was maybe like 5 people who read
Yeah.
like the first
Well,
ones for
sure.
me, but
Yeah. But
I
that's
still felt
enough,
like I
right?
couldn't. Yeah, I didn't want to disappoint those 5 people.
Of course. Sometimes that's even harder. It's like, because you might even like at that point you could know each of them by name. You're like, I don't want
Yeah.
to upset Bob. Like Bob is expecting this thing, versus like a faceless mass of people. Yeah.
But yeah, and I guess, but still, I have like so much more respect for you just because I've also tried making music before in the past, and it's not, at least for me, it's like not an easy thing. Even though I played music for a really long time, it's like,
Mm.
um, yeah, it's not easy. I
Yeah. I mean,
imagine
I
you just
have.
like kind of you dream music at this point.
I mean, I have a very strict philosophy around basically like the trick is to like not care. The trick is to like is to be totally fine with like making something totally horrible every day if I have to.
Right.
Which not everybody can do by any means. That's a really hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Um, but I do think, and I always say this, like especially when it comes to music or anything, really, like doing it every day for like a week or a month can be transformative in that way. Because if you give yourself permission within a certain boundary set to suck, where it's like, okay, I'm going to do it for a month and I'm going to know that some of those days are going to suck. Like that's probably an easier lift than saying, okay, I'm going to make a song a day forever and many days are going to suck and that's going to be how it is.
Mhm.
I just sort of happen to have like the kind of personality for whatever reason that it's not like an obsessive thing exactly, but it's just like, yeah, it's a lot of different things, but it's just like I feel better every day when I've made a song like that.
Yeah.
That's really just like what it comes down to,
Yeah. Yeah.
even if the song sucks.
Yeah. That's sort of. I mean, I felt similarly when I was first starting that I couldn't just sort of, oh, it needs to be completely perfect before I publish something. And,
Right.
if I don't miss, I can't miss these other points because, I mean, if especially for this particular space, we're talking about crypto and in front of leftists, like it's notoriously pedantic and notoriously like, you can never expect everyone to agree with you. So that's like a huge problem that I've suffered from as well. And then I just had to like convince myself like, no, just do it. And, it's okay to be wrong every once in a while.
And I'm sure you found that like blog posts or episodes or things that you thought were not your best. You've heard from people who've been like, oh, I love that one. Or like, oh, that one was a great one or whatever. Like you never know what people's response is going to be, which is really
for
cute.
sure. I mean, it's really difficult for me to listen to like the first episodes or like read the first to read. I mean, anything that I write, I get like really nervous.
Yeah.
But and then like if I think about kind of like this 14 years, especially that you were sort of being online and publishing music.
Yeah.
It's like going through it, I feel like I'm watching like the development of like millennial culture almost.
Oh
like,
yeah.
Through music. And it's crazy to me. Like there's so many like there's a song for like each day in which there was some like maybe somewhat important like event in at least American history during that time. Yes. Or like, I mean, just internet history in general.
Internet history, yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, like things people won't even remember. Like some things people will remember, and frankly, I wouldn't remember them if I hadn't written a song about them, probably. But like, I think a good example when you say that, it makes me think of the dress. Like what color is the dress? Like that song. I made a song for that, or like.
It's white and gold, just to be clear.
Right. and there, and then there's things like that people won't remember, but like things that were like, the talk of the town for like a week or something. When there was like a monkey in IKEA, there was like a monkey in IKEA or something. Like I have a song about that, or like a dolphin in the Gowanus Canal. Like there's a lot, like, yeah, and that's just, that's purely a function, right, of being very online TM, but also just constantly needing something to write about, and so whatever the talk of the day is, like it made sense to make songs about it. It's sort of funny now where actually now that I'm so neck deep in crypto, that wider internet culture thing has narrowed down to, I'm writing songs about like ETH's march towards proof of stake, right? Like I did a song about EIP 1559, and I did a song about like the Kiln merge and these and now I just did one about the shadow forks, and like so now I'm writing songs like very esoteric songs about like the ETH history and things in crypto. It's a little less wide, but I imagine like eventually one would look like 10 years later at those and be like, oh look, there's all these like weird random crypto history things that happen in SongADAO.
Well, yeah, I guess I'd say probably first off, it's maybe because there's so much more internet now.
Yeah,
I guess versus the beginning, there's just like, I don't know, when something went viral, It was like that one thing went viral that, for some time, and everyone kind of knew it. And then now it's sort of like, all right, there's like 14 different things going viral and like 23 different sub niches of the internet that are sort of like overlapping, but not really necessarily completely looking at the same type of content and in their own little bubbles and such.
I'd say that's very true. It's rare now that there's like a what color is the dress moment where the entire internet is talking about the exact same thing, right?
Right.
And I guess if I think about it, when those things happen, and they are more rare now, I will probably write a song about it because it just like makes sense to.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess with the crypto stuff, I guess that is largely having to do with you were already interested in NFTs and like writing about CryptoPunks. I think it was like 2017 or 18 you had first, which is like well before. I mean, I don't even think I knew about CryptoPunks at that time either.
Nobody did. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's I guess we can let's talk about, because having probably I guess gone through or being deeply entrenched into like the YouTube algorithm, or like being sort of like, I don't know, a victim of it. I
Yes,
guess you could
yes,
say,
great word. Yes, please, yeah.
which is like this centralized institution, and like that can, if you are like a, I mean, I don't know how dependent you were necessarily like on your money off of that, but if you are like very dependent on it, then like, you know, it can make a huge effect on that. So like, I think what sometimes people, or like people on the left maybe sometimes forget, is like how much control like this one tech company has for this platform. And like there isn't really, I guess, just you know, taking YouTube but giving it to the state seems like not necessarily like the best
Yeah,
answer to it.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, totally. And thinking about Twitter too, you know, with like the idea of Elon Musk buying Twitter, it's like the alternative, or like the farthest alternative one could imagine is like, you know, nationalizing Twitter or something, which I don't think, yeah, would necessarily be the right way to go either. It could be, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's a big maybe, and it's a, yeah, I think especially, I don't know, in the American context, it feels very unlikely to be a good thing.
Well, like, you know, in the American context, like nationalizing something like Twitter, and this is me talking completely extemporaneously about this, but like, you know, one could imagine it would be subject to the whims, right, of like the really like far right maniacal thing that is taking over, and then it's just like anything else, like in our culture right now, where it's like it feels like, oh, Donald Trump, and then, you know, over here and over there, it's like if we just get yanked this way and that way, it would be weird
Yeah,
if Twitter was like
getting yanked.
literally,
Yeah.
yeah, getting yanked as well, exactly, yeah.
um, but I guess your interest from NFTs, I imagine, somewhat comes from like a critique based on your experience with these various different online platforms.
Yeah, completely. I mean, you know, so to like pinpoint it, it was like it was seeing CryptoPunks in 2017. Like for context, they launched in July of 2017, and I was introduced to them by my friend Boris in September of 2017, and I wrote a song about them like the week after I discovered them, because like I was like, this is amazing. Like this is the, you know, I didn't have like I can't say that I had like a fully formed idea of like what NFTs could be or would be. They weren't even called NFTs at that point.
Yeah,
But like, but I had this like, you know, I had this notion that there was some kind of new tool here that could be used by people like me who made stuff on the internet to like find a way to make money off of it that sidestepped, you know, all the other traditional ways that one would make money on the internet by ad revenue or whatever, by making things, as we say, sort of would say at the time, like digitally scarce, which is kind of a misnomer and is like actually the wrong
right.
framework, you know, now, but like that's sort of how we were understanding at the time. um oh, what was Matt Dryhurst? I was just listening to an episode of Interdependence with Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst, and he said this really great way of like an alternative to digital scarcity. It was something abundance, like workable abundance or something like that,
Mm,
a totally flipped it on its head, where it's like it's not exactly that it's digitally scarce. It's that like for the first time we can have things in abundance that still gives value back to the person that created it, which is like
right. Yeah. Yeah.
which is the main point. It's not the scarcity that's the point. It's this like abundance with value flowing back to the person who like, you know, is creating the thing.
Right. But I guess whenever, so like when you saw CryptoPunks, was it really an interest in necessarily the project CryptoPunks, or was it like the realization of
It
like
was
this one
both.
little thing?
It was both, and it was, and in fact, I know we're not on video, but like I recently went on eBay because the thing that got me was I used to love these little guys. I don't know if you had these where you grew up.
I'm not
These
sure.
are, these are called Muscle Men, and they're just
Okay.
like they were just, I had these as a kid, and they're essentially, you know, they're just like many different of these little pink dudes, and they just all have their own little like look, and they all look different or whatever. And I recently went on eBay and like just bought a bunch. But like, so from like a nostalgia point of view, it got me on like a heart level almost, because I just saw them and I was like I was smitten. I was like smitten with the project from just like a, I don't know, whatever that is. I just liked
Like
it.
as a collector, or like the
Yeah.
idea of collecting.
Yes, exactly. And I loved the way they looked, and I loved looking at all of them, and I loved it. Like brought back this feeling that I remember having as a kid, and I love that moment. I'm a very nostalgic person, and so I love like having these moments where some long dormant thing from my childhood is like brought to the fore, and I have this like rush of nostalgia. It's a very intoxicating feeling. So that was this feeling that I had. And then when I started to understand, like, you know, I didn't understand the technology at all, but like the way it was explained to me was like, like it started with currency, right? And so you have this coin, that is digitally scarce, and now you have this little piece of art that's digitally scarce, and because of that you can like buy it, you can trade it, and people can own it, and it's this different thing. And so I don't know, something in the mixture there of this rush of nostalgia made me love it so much. I like wrote to John and Matt, who are the creators of it, and like made them take me out to lunch so we could talk about it. I just loved it so much. And then, but also like seeing like, oh, like I have all these songs, right? I have all these SongADAO songs. There's 10,000 CryptoPunks. At that time, I had like 3,500 songs or whatever. I have all these songs, and like, nothing really to do with them. Like people can stream them. That doesn't do much. Like people can watch them on YouTube. What if people could collect them as like little objects on the internet? That's like pretty cool. Like that's like sort of where it started for me. Like that's a whole other, it blew my mind that could be a thing. And I got so excited about it. Yeah.
And you have this, you shared with me this like basically Twitter thread that you had done, I think beginning of this year.
Yeah.
That sort of went through the process. So I'll share that to people in the show notes so they can go through it. And then as well, I think it would be interesting. I'll share you did like a sort of a mini podcast, I guess, kind of going through your process of making songs, which that was really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, and hearing you sort of like doubting yourself, being like, "Oh, that sounds cool," so I'll play with that. And
yeah. I wanted to make a podcast that sort of answered the question, which is like, what's your process, right? Like, do you start with the lyrics? Do you start with the music? And the answer that I give in this podcast over the course of 10 episodes is basically like, yes, like everything. I try to like in each episode of the podcast, like, okay, this week we're going to start with the music. This week we're going to start with the lyrics. This week we're going to start with nothing. I have no ideas. This week we're going to start with an idea. This week we're going to start with a, article that I read. This week we're going to start with something I found on Twitter. Like just every different possible way of starting a song. I wanted to showcase like, and this is how it works. That was the goal with that podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, I recommend it. And so, like, from what I understand as well, based on that, some of the things that I heard you say and that you've written, so you're interested in what were later to become NFTs back in like starting in 2017, and then trying it out, trying to do it with something with your songs, but it didn't really take off until sometime after. Like once NFTs, I mean, really the NFT, like the first wave of NFT excitement and like the Beeple sale and all these things. I mean, I guess, I imagine I kind of almost wanted to call you like the Beeple of music, but like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if you would appreciate that one because
no, it's fine. It definitely like frames things. But I will say, and I've talked about this before, but like literally I can remember this moment because it was a very big moment in the history of this project where, and I talk about this in the thread that you'll link to, where I had been working so long on this project. I worked for like 2 years trying to get it off the ground, like to no avail, finding a Solidity developer. Like there's just basically no interest in NFTs, more or less. Like, um, so then it had kind of gone dormant for a while in my life, and I was laying in bed. It's like late December 2020, and I was like, I follow people on Insta, and he had posted like a little video of him being like, "Hey, I can't believe like I just made $2 million selling out my NFT project," and my heart like sank to the floor. I'm like the other thing a day person like has done it, like they did it already. Like, what did I do? Like I missed my chance. Like I felt horrible. But then my interest renewed, and me and Matt Condon, who you've been on our podcast Digitally Rare, like we restarted our podcast back up after like a 8-month hiatus or something, and like I dove back in, and luckily
Mhm.
luckily it was I think it's fair to credit whatever else you think about people. I happen to really respect him and like enjoy those images that he makes. But like whatever you think about him, I don't think it's like out of the realm to say that like that sale specifically, and then his later sale, which is problematic in and of itself. Let's just say the other sale is actually kind of problematic in the way that it went down. But like really did make NFTs what they are. And there's a lot of problems with NFTs, but like all the sort of scheming and dreaming and thinking about it that I did way back when now at least has a chance to come to fruition. Now at least has a chance to be something good for
Mhm.
people who make things on the internet. Whatever
Yeah.
else you could say about it, and there's a lot else you can say about it, but like it at least has a chance now to be something good.
Yeah, I guess for at least I mean the obvious thing I guess to say is that he probably got it first just because like digital art, like images were like the easiest, it's the lowest amount of memory or whatever,
Yep.
like type of media to share online. So
He also has a much more gigantic audience than I do, which doesn't hurt.
no, okay, yeah. I think his the provocativeness of his imagery is something
Yes.
else.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So then I imagine, and we talked about this probably before, but seeing that wave and then seeing then as well, I guess the backlash then that sort of came afterwards,
Yes.
of course, of like people that maybe you liked or respected afterwards, whenever it was something like, oh, everyone who's interested in it is just in it for like some sort of cash grab. And
Yeah.
like there's some truth to that, but then I guess if you are someone who was like in it, like, trying
Yeah.
to go do it for like years and then it never really worked, and then not, I don't know. I guess I'm curious what like how you were thinking about it. Was it similar to like what it is now or what it is like sort of becoming? Like you wanted it more of this sort of cooperative vision?
Yeah. Yeah. The people that have come out against it, Dan Olson, right? Like in his famous video, "Let number go up," like and
Who you spoke like you spoke with on your podcast. I remember listening to it like before that video came out.
before the video. Yeah, I invited him on because I saw that he was working on that video, because I follow him, and we've been sort of online acquaintances for years. Since
Yeah.
Gamergate, actually. We were both harassed and harangued by Gamergaters, and so that's when we sort of connected. To see him come out so strongly against it after years of me like working on it and no one caring, and then people that I respect coming out it like so strongly against it, it was like serious whiplash. It was like, whoa, like what, like yeah, where were you years ago where I was so excited about it and there was no money in it and nobody cared. Uh to answer your question though, like if I'm honest, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, actually, I've been thinking about like, because it's been 5 years, you're right? Like 2017 was 5 years ago. And so I think about like in those days, the conversations that we would have in our sort of small, nascent crypto art communities. Like, I don't think, no, we couldn't have imagined what it is now at all. Like,
Mhm.
period, end of story. Like what it has become, the good and the bad. I don't think that we thought that it would happen the way it did, or even as quickly. Um, and just to flip that, I also now I think about 5 years in the future, and I'm like, I don't think that I don't think anyone could make a prediction about what these things will look like 5 years in the future. If I think about what I thought back then versus now, and I think about what I try to extrapolate from now to then, it's like, you know what, I'm completely wrong. And
Mm,
all of, and so all I can do is try to continue to like shove the what it is now into the direction that I hope that we can go, which is, you know, less centralization, less hype, less sort of bullshit, and more, I don't know, more giving like just people who create stuff online another tool in their toolbox to to make a living doing what they want to do. Like that's always been like my guiding principle in what
mm.
NFTs could be. Is it's just like it doesn't have to be a replacement for anything that already exists, but it could be just like another thing that exists to like help people make a living doing what they're doing. And it's become so much more than that, right? It's become this big hype machine full of moonbirds and bored apes
Yeah,
and
yeah.
things. And I you know, I'm very cynical about all that stuff.
Do you get tagged in like these NFT
Oh yeah.
bot things?
Yes.
It is
It's
getting ridiculous. Like the
it's
spam is getting like pretty insane.
I'll give you a little bit of alpha, as they say, on that front, which is I actually got this from Dame, who's a wonderful follow on Scott on Twitter. If you're not following him, what is he? Dame.eth, like all spelled out. Um, they suggested, and it's a great suggestion. You go in your settings on Twitter, and you can like lock down some of your settings to say like block replies from people who haven't verified their email, who haven't verified their phone number, who don't have
Mm,
a profile picture.
mm.
Doing those three things has almost brought it down to like zero.
Oh wow.
I still get it occasionally, but do that. That's a big plus in my book.
Pro
Yeah,
tip. Yeah, I'm
pro
gonna do
tip exactly.
that. Yeah, and it's of course you and I have complained about this before, but you know, it's this space is very much like between a rock and a hard place,
Right.
where you have it's sort of like yes, I agree with lots of your criticisms, but it only goes so far.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, and even further, there's a deeper thing too, where until there's some kind of like NFTs specifically, right? Until it is cheap to buy them and relatively normal to buy them and to collect them, um, the space actually does rely on the bullshit to keep it going. Without the
Mm,
bullshit, right now, NFTs would not be, without the kind of like wild, rampant speculation and wild kind of like influencer driven uh, things, the NFT space would collapse in an instant without all of that like the hype cycle stuff,
yeah.
because there's just not enough people to collect them
There's now way more projects than like I think.
completely. And so that sucks. That just like, and you know, the place I would love to get to is like where fees on Ethereum, and I know there's Solana and there's all these other things, and I really applaud projects that like use other chains. For instance, Nina, there's this platform, a music platform on Solana called Nina, that allows artists to set their own price for what they're selling. And because the fees on Nina are like cents, you know, it's like 10 cents or something, you can set a price of $5 to collect something. And that's amazing. Like that to me is way more sustainable, obviously, and way more in line with like sort of what I imagined. What I imagined SongADAO NFT, what I like my wildest dream was that maybe I could sell my song every day for like $100 or something. Like maybe there'd be somebody out there who'd want to pay $100 every day to me to collect that day's song. And because of all the hype and everything, I was able to do way better than that when I sort of did my big drop. And that's amazing for me, but it's not the sort of sustainable,
Right.
like,
It's obviously not a systemic solution that like,
exactly. It's not something
because
that
I was successful in this one thing that we've solved it.
yes, it's not something that people can replicate, and it's not something that's useful to most people yet, but things like Nina, I think, are sort of leading the way of like, that's way more accessible and neat, and there really is something that's like just different. The thing that makes me hopeful is there still really is just something different. And it's really intangible and it's really weird, but there's something different about collecting an NFT of a song on something like Nina, say for instance, versus buying the Bandcamp
Mhm.
of the song. Could be the same price, could be almost the exact same experience, but just to know, I don't know. I was gonna say just to know that the NFT lives outside of a centralized platform, but I don't think
Mm.
that's it. I don't think it's like even that heady. It's not. There's something emotionally different about owning like this like digital object versus just buying the song.
Do you think maybe it has to do with like for me what NFTs are interesting for when it comes to collecting, although I'm not really a collector.
Yeah.
I think yours was like the only NFT I really purchased during the drop.
Yeah.
But I think the idea that when you purchase an NFT, there's always a link between you as a buyer directly to the
Yes.
person who
I
created
like that.
that.
Yes.
And therefore, like if you are the creator of that, if you want to do, there's always the option. You don't have to do it. Like you can always do something with that information. Like with the people who own your NFT, you can do X, Y, Z, which you can't really do. I mean, okay, if you buy a Bandcamp thing, maybe you can give a, I don't know, thank you email to all the people who are like in your Bandcamp who have purchased from you on Bandcamp. But like that's a very different thing than like, I don't know, I can airdrop something to thank all of the people. I mean, now it might be interesting to talk about because I think that's kind of exactly what SongADAO DAO /
Yes.
co-op is sort of doing, which is like, yeah, I think has not gotten really any attention. And of course, Dan in his video, I don't think ever even made a reference to any of it.
No, he didn't. And that's exactly right. And so I'll say this, like, so SongADAO, the way SongADAO works is you buy a Song a Day NFT. And by the way, like, we're on Ethereum, so the fees are high and it's sort of prohibitively expensive for most people to get involved, which is why we have a way for people to join the DAO, which I can talk to, that doesn't involve money. But you get a Song a Day NFT, and then you join the Discord. And when you join the Discord, you become what's called a listener. We have like basically 3 classes of ownership within the co-op. And the first one is called a listener, and at that point you're not technically really in the co-op yet. You're sort of, I sort of think about it as like in concentric circles. So on the other, there's like outside circle, we're in the DAO, and that just means you're sort of hanging out. You can you could like chime in on things, but first what you have to do is you have to verify with something called Bright ID, which doesn't give us any information about who you are. It just, Bright ID is a tool for what's called Sybil resistance, in terms of like just verifying that you are a human being associated with a single ETH address. And once you do that, now you're officially in the co-op. And now what you can do is you have like now you're in like the slightly more inner circle, in that you can vote on the treasury. In fact, we've had 2 votes to date. One about doing stuff with NFTX, which is like a whole thing, but also one about paying this artist to make a bunch of PFPs for the DAO, for the co-op. And then the third concentric circle is called a builder. And at that point, what you do is you sign this co-op membership agreement. And then any work that you do for the DAO, you could be compensated for legally as part of the co-op, because we're this legal entity. We have this co-op framework where you are now a co-owner in the DAO. You do work and you can be paid, not in a token, but basically in fiat or ETH or whatever, however you want to be paid at the end of the year, for the work that you've done. So that's the basic. That's like the basic structure of SongADAO. And the way that we have for people to join is we have this monthly cohort of people who are making a thing every day for a month. And so we had a cohort in February, which is like 3 people. We had like 4 people in March, and now we have 5 people in April. That reminds me, I have to like put the call out for May. But you make something every day for a month, and you're in the Discord and you're sharing it, and we all sort of verify that you're doing it. It's very loose, but like we see you doing it every day for a month, and then at the end of the month we give you a SongADAO NFT, and then you don't have to spend any money. It's proof of work. You've proved that you have made something, and then you can join the DAO by we talk in DAOs a lot about like assigning or aligning incentives, right? And the idea is that you own a SongADAO NFT, and so your incentives are aligned with the DAOs because you want your NFT to become more valuable, and that way, blah blah blah. But in this way, it's like a whole different incentive alignment. It's like you've shown that, like, you're down with this idea of making a thing a day, which is a sort of core tenet of the DAO. And so now you're part of the club. You're part of the co-op.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this episode so far, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, share with a friend, and join the crypto leftist communities on Discord or Reddit, which you can find links to in the show notes. If you're enjoying the interview or find the content that I make important, you can pitch into my efforts starting at $3 a month on patreon.com/theblockchainsocialist to help me out and join the newest patrons like James, John, Eva, Paige, Ande, and Rob. It really helps since making this stuff isn't free in terms of money or time. As a patron, you'll get a shout out on an episode like I just did and access to bonus content like Q&A episodes where you can submit and vote on questions you'd like me to answer, and I'll give my thoughts in roughly 20 minutes. In the last bonus episode, I spoke to 2 other crypto leftists who went to ETH Denver, and we spoke about their experience of being there. Of course, I'll still be making free content like this interview to help spread the message that blockchain does not need to be used to further entrench capitalist exploitation if we put our efforts into it. So if that message resonates with you, I hope you'll consider helping out. Yeah, very cool. Like, this is like, I'm really glad you're explaining this to me. One, because I need to do those things because I have an NFT and I think I need to join your Discord and do all that stuff. And yeah, this is like very, very novel and like innovative. And like, when people are talking about DAOs, and what the impression that people get about DAOs is that it is like a corporation on the blockchain and that the tokens are just like basically
Shares.
stocks within
Right.
shares. Yeah. So there was that. And then recently I've seen people, various left-wing celebrities I won't mention, saying like, oh, it's just a cooperative. What you made is a cooperative. And then sort of like leaving it at that.
Yeah.
And then sort of like, well, okay, like, yes, kind of. It's a little bit different than that, but like you're kind of getting there, like slowly, but you're still saying it in like a negative way. So I don't really understand what you're, like have you ever tried like starting a cooperative? Have you ever tried like doing all these things? You understand what the problems are with cooperatives. You seem to like them, but then you're like shitting on them at the same time.
Yeah.
This critique?
Yeah. What's the problem with it just be a different? Do you not want there to be more cooperatives in the world? I thought that was our whole, that's part of our whole thing, isn't it? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it, but like, so then now here I think it's really interesting where you're showing clearly like the upside or like the benefits of like having the DAO as well as a cooperative as sort of like interlinked entities, or just like having a what's the word, just being able to interact with one another and having like this like clear relationship.
Yeah, and our pal Austin Roby like wrote a great blog post about this, where he basically said like what co-ops and DAOs can learn from each other, and I would highly recommend checking that out. But like Another like novel feature of SongADAO is that, and this is something that I really strongly believe in as a leftist, and just in general, I think it doesn't make any sense that we would do it a different way. Like most DAOs are based on the way the voting works is based on your token distribution, right? And again, it comes down to this like alignment of incentives, like, oh, you have more tokens, which means you must
You
believe
earn
it.
more.
Yeah, you must have done more on behalf of the DAO, which can be true, but doesn't necessarily have to be true. You could just buy the tokens and have a bigger
Right.
vote. So SongADAO, we actually made like the very first what's called a snapshot strategy. So there's this way that most DAOs use to vote is called Snapshot, and it's like a sort of an app, and you create different strategies. So you're like, oh, like here's how the token weighted distribution of the votes works, is like how the strategies usually work. But what we did is we create a strategy where it's like, here's my bright ID, which proves that I'm a human, a single human. Here's my NFT, and you get one vote. One person in the DAO, it gets one vote. Doesn't matter. You might own, you might like Pranksy, who's this like NFT influencer who's a fan of mine and a friend, like owns 100 NFTs. He still just gets one vote, just like everyone else, you know?
And does he
Um,
care? I wonder, like, for him,
yeah.
is he like okay with that?
I mean, we haven't talked about it, and I don't think
Okay.
he's technically not in the DAO yet. But the people who are in the DAO who own, one of our guys in the DAO is one of the he's the founder of Bright ID, and he owns a ton of songs, and like he's
Mm,
totally down with it. Like he very much
right.
appreciates and I think that, to me, that's a really important sort of co-op uh, thing of like one person, one vote is like really important to
Yeah.
to making it
To the
fair
ethos. Yeah.
to the ethos. Exactly.
I mean, this setup completely flies in the face of like all these sort of like surface level criticizers who talk about like, oh, it's just like, it's just like you're just making a cooperative but with a speculative token, or like it's just like a stock and it's just like a company. So like it's because I think there is like the surface level critique where, yes, a lot of DAOs, especially
Yep.
the first ones, have this token governance that looks a lot like a stock basically, or just allows them to vote, and it comes from a very libertarian idea.
Yep.
And then, but like if you just have like a tiny bit of imagination, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a better word, but like, yeah, imagination to adjust some of the things a little bit, because if you understand a little bit of the intricacies, you can know where the things can be tweaked. Then you've completed something like quite different, and that does not follow this template of like, what is essentially decentralized autonomous corporation is now like uh, along the lines of like a cooperative ethos, and is taking advantage of the functionalities of smart contracts and on all these things, and having a global substrate for all these.
And what's wild about it is that and I think you and I may have actually talked about this before, which is there's this kind of almost like libertarian to like leaning socialist pipeline that happens where they get socialized by like by crypto, because suddenly you have these like libertarian people talking about like cooperative ownership of things.
Right, yeah.
Almost accidentally they sort of back into it, where now you can start that conversation and be like, yes, let's talk more about this cooperative owning things, like that's one side of it. And then the other side of it is that I think about is you know there's a fair critique to say, like, there's a pretty fair critique that one could say about something like SongADAO, for instance. Let's take that as an example, where you could say like, well, do you really need the blockchain for this? Like, you could sell your songs as, sort of centralized database and NFTs, right? You could do that. You could have the collectors of those NFTs join a co-op. Like the co-op, there's nothing about the co-op nature, the nature of the co-op, that has to be sort of blockchain based. You know, one little wrinkle is that like a lot of like everything within the blockchain ecosystem is composable and can work with each other. So you wouldn't get any of that. Okay, that's fine. But like you could basically do this without the blockchain, which is true. But even beyond the composability argument, I think like the strongest argument to me is like, yeah, but I didn't. And like, yeah, but people aren't doing that. Like if people
Right.
were making
Exactly.
co-ops
Yes.
and doing it with those things, that would be an argument. But like no one is. No one's
Ask yourself the question, like when you say that, why is no one else doing that then?
Yeah.
Right? That's
Yeah,
like-
exactly. If they were, they would be, and that would be great, and we could talk about that, and that would be another way to do it. And by the way, there are a lot of things that are on the blockchain that don't need to be, right? There's a lot of things that like it doesn't make sense to have on chain. And there's a lot and there's tools now coming online. We had a great podcast on Digitally Rare about this with Evan. Her name is Evan. I forget her last name. But I think her Twitter handle is Proven Authority, talking about many different ways of having sort of like off-chain verified things, which is great. But what it comes down to is like, what are people actually doing? Where is the excitement? Where's the energy? Where are people willing to try these experiments, these wild, weird experiments in co-ownership? It just happens to be in the space. So poo-poo it all you want, but like this is where it's happening. And if you want to do it in a different way, I would love to see someone do something similar to SongADAO with no blockchain. And just like genuinely, I would be curious and interested and fascinated to see someone try that. And like what would that look like and how would that work? And like, that would be great. But so far no one has. And I think that they would have trouble unless they had a really big audience. Like I don't have a big audience. I don't have a huge following. Like I'm able to make this work because of the excitement and energy around this stuff already,
Mhm. Yeah. Like sometimes I want to say that like blockchain is not really a technological solution
Yeah.
to majority of things. It's like actually very
Very
efficient.
limited.
It's
Yeah.
very limited, but it is also like these limitations that are good things about it in the sense that it is like very secure. It's very resilient in certain ways. Like there are just trade-offs. Like it's kind of silly. People keep saying, "Oh well, we just put it on like a more efficient centralized database." It's like, okay, yeah, well, okay, do that, see what happens. Like it's not really happening.
Right.
So I like to think of blockchain as really like, I mean, probably the most political technology we've seen in a very long time,
Right?
Because it's like meant for solving more political solutions. If you think of even the original intent of it, which I think wasn't really achieved, of like digital cash. Like yes, we already have digital cash in the form of like our bank cards,
yeah,
and like Venmo, PayPal. We already have digital cash, but
right.
There was like this political desire for wanting this, but like outside of state authority or bank authority or whatever.
Yeah,
and I think that kind of logic could be applied in other places.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I think like it would have been nice if that had worked too. It would have been interesting.
But I guess so. If you're, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're a member of the DAO or the co-op, and remember, you are also like you get to take part in the governance around like the shared pool of resources, and maybe you get as well like a portion of like the revenues raised from the selling of the songs.
Yeah, so actually we're like right in the midst of really hammering all this out. And so we have retained, is that the right word? We've retained the services of an accountant who specializes in co-ops and who happens to now be interested in DAOs. In fact, I sort of joke that like, he's been interested in DAOs for like the last 3 months. And so like as a co-op accountant interested in DAOs for the last 3 months, he's like the world's foremost expert in DAOs and co-ops. But we actually just had a meeting with him where, we had a whole discussion where he's like having a really hard time wrapping his mind around, okay, like what does the DAO do? Like, how does it work? Like, what are you creating? Like what, because from his perspective, like, and he represents a ton of agricultural co-ops in the US, right? So he described like a bean co-op that he represents, where it's like, the lima bean growers and the black bean growers and the red bean growers, they pool all their resources
Pool the
and
beans.
they pool the beans literally, right? They collectively pay for the processing and the packaging. They collectively pay for all this. And then the way it works is at the end of the year, there's some accounting that happens, and based on how many beans you provided and the price of the beans versus these other beans, everyone gets a cut of the entire pie, right? That everyone puts all their resources together and everybody gets a proportion. So we're doing essentially the same thing with SongADAO. And what that's looking like it's going to look in practice is, for instance, we have some developers who have been doing various projects for the DAO. We have my friend Matt, who's been running the cohorts for the Thing-A-Day stuff. These are people who have been providing their labor to the DAO, and we just have to figure out, basically, and this is a tricky thing, we don't know how we're going to do this, figure out how we're going to compensate, how the DAO is going to collectively compensate everyone for the various things that they've done on behalf of the DAO. We don't know yet. There's a protocol called Coordinate,
Yeah.
which you may have heard of. It's a kind of fun idea. Basically, you are distributed a bunch of tokens, kind of just like valueless tokens. They're just to be used within your community for this explicit purpose of like, we give everybody who is a builder, right, who has both verified with Bright ID and signed the membership agreement, given us their full name and address and everything for tax purposes. We give all of these people, say, 100 tokens, and each person allocates their tokens to the people who they think, I'm going to give like 20 to Matt because he's been doing such a great job with the cohorts, and I'm going to give 20 to Alan because he's done an amazing job with this, and 20 to this person, and just give them to different people, and then based on everyone's allocations, that's how we divvy up the treasury. That's like one way that we're thinking about it. We have few enough people right now that are like actually actively contributing. For context, we have like basically there's like 1,600 people who hold a SongADAO NFT, which is like if every single one of those person went through this process, that's like that could be our entire membership if everyone went through them. But then we have out of that we have about 700 people in the Discord, and then like 40 people who have 70 people who have done the Bright ID section. So 70 people are eligible to vote. But then we really only have maybe like 11 or 12 people who are like regularly doing work on behalf of the DAO. So that's like a few enough people that we could just like amongst ourselves be like, let's feel it out. Like, what do you guys think? Like, who should get what, but we're figuring that out. But that's the general idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think my impression is that DAOs are going to excel in these more like smaller groups of people and like kind of coordinating together, at least for now, rather than trying to compete as like, I don't know, giant conglomerate corporations or something like that. Doesn't seem like a feasible thing, not for a long time, unless you're like MakerDAO or something, like a huge just like DeFi, like purely incentive based institution or whatever. Yeah,
it'd be very, and this is like this is where you start getting like the 5-year kind of prediction place, right? Like Yuga Labs, right? Like Yuga Labs, Bored Apes, their DAO. Like like what is that going to look like in 5 years? Is it going to look like anything? Is Bored Apes going to be around in 5 years? I have no idea. Honestly, like I think that's it's funny to think about now, but Bored Apes didn't exist a year ago, or it barely existed a year ago, and it'll be very interesting to me to see if how many DAOs exist, in 5 years. That exist now.
Actually, how was it this process of setting it up? with like as a cooperative one, and also like because what is interesting about your project, the SongADAO, is that it's in collaboration with so many other artists. That I think like the one of the things that I've gotten from you and following you like from afar on the internet is that like a lot of things that you're doing, even though the Song a Day stuff is like of course your own thing that you're doing your own, but like you're collaborating with people a lot of the time and seem to like
Yes.
almost prefer collaboration.
Yes, ideally. Yes, totally.
Which I thought was interesting. So like, and because I imagine the setup of the cooperative part, I mean, you are probably the first person ever that I know of who was like really doing it and like is a pioneer probably in that with the people that you were working with.
Yeah, well, so what's great is that like the lawyers that I worked with to set up the cooperative, Jacqueline and Yev are their names. They're wonderful and they're great. I learned a ton from them, and they set up. So East Denver has a cooperative structure as well. Their structure is much more complicated and multi-armed. But they're in Colorado, and it turns out that, and this is a wonderful quote from my lawyers, which is basically like Colorado is the Delaware of co-ops in the US. So, every company, when someone like spins up a startup or, starts a company anywhere in the US, they always start it in Delaware because of tax reasons. There's reasons to like have your LLC based in Delaware that are like good for taxes or whatever. And Delaware is just very friendly to like starting a business. Colorado, for reasons that I don't totally understand, happens to just be really friendly to co-ops. Like it's a co-op mecca of sorts. And so you can start a co-op anywhere in the US based in Colorado, like to have Colorado as the base. And so Yev and Jacqueline are in Colorado and so are really at the forefront. And when I call them experts, I'm not saying it tongue in cheek. Like they really are now experts. I would say they helped first Spork DAO, which is ETH Denver's one, and then I was the second one. And now they've just been helping a ton of different projects on board into the co-op place, and it's relatively painless. It's a little expensive, lawyers are always expensive, and that's how it is. But like, but it's just like setting up a company. We got bylaws. You get to make all these sort of seemingly arbitrary decisions that you need to make to make this happen. But it's I really think like it's just like a little bit more work upfront to do it, and then you're like, not only do I feel like I'm like aligning with my values, right? But I'm also, I think, like protecting myself and everyone else involved legally, from whatever the SEC wants to do, right or wrong. In some ways right and sometimes wrong, but like whatever they want to do down the line, I don't think that we're going to be really subject to any of that because we have this like very sort of clear legal format.
Yeah, it's to me again just another like clear example where there is this impression people may have of like NFTs being a type of technology to basically put more on the individual, and is just like this continuation of neoliberalism and individualism and whatever else other isms. That by getting rid of the middlemen, actually this is sometimes like a bad thing because then it just puts more on you as like the person who is like creating the thing. And so NFTs are just a continuation of that. But here we're seeing it like clearly as like all these things as actually a part of configuring like collectivity. Like emergent collectivity is now able to become like a more sustainable collectivity. Rather than like, I don't know, sometimes, I mean, if you've like tried doing like little collective projects with your friends, sometimes like they start off in like, a burst of flame, they're out just as quickly. And like, you don't get like all these other types of guarantees that like keep something like that going. Here, we're able to sort of like, we're creating a bit of like I don't know, I guess Frankenstein a bit of like here you have a little bit of legal technology, a little bit of blockchain technology,
Yes.
and putting them together
Yeah.
to something that is like, yeah, clearly it looks like it's going to be like quite sustainable.
I mean, everything's a trade-off, right? Like yes, with the middlemen, you get maybe a little bit more protections with certain things, but you're also completely subject to the whims of
Yeah,
the man in the middle, you know? And in this
like by
way,
the
or
market or something.
by the market or whatever Google, like
Yeah,
you said, the whims of being subject to the whims of Google's algorithm, um uh is just not sustainable for anybody, for anything. It just doesn't work because yeah, people's livelihoods have been ruined because Google like made some random, or Facebook for that matter, made some random tweak to how they are going to show things. And you don't have to worry about that with NFTs because I'm just selling them directly to people who want to buy them. And when I do, that money goes directly into the DAO's treasury, and that's the money that we use to do things.
yeah. I guess there's like some amount of maybe like curation. I guess is maybe somewhat of a similar function. But yeah, I think what's interesting at least is that you can bring all of your, at least, I kind of hate this like creator economy type of bullshit terminology, but you can like get your like biggest fans together at the very least, and have that core group of people that support you to build something that is more sustainable.
And then you can find fans who come at you from a different angle. Like I'm finding through this cohort thing, people are really, maybe they're not like the biggest fans of my music, but they're fans of the project in general. Like they're fans
Mm.
of co-ops, or they're fans of
Mm.
making something every day or whatever, and that's just like giving a different outlet. Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, I think this is really. I mean, just 2 points that I'm thinking. Like one is that it is interesting to see all these like supposed libertarians turning to cooperativists, basically,
Yeah.
over time. I think part of that is probably the influence of like someone like Nathan Schneider,
Yep.
and that's like, to me, I think like sorely underreported, or like not understood at all. But like I see prominent left wing academics like talking about, oh, blockchain is just this continuation of neoliberalism, individualism, and then they use like one of Nathan Schneider's critiques of the blockchain world, to like continue their
Yes,
their
yes.
their evidence, and I'm like, don't you know that he is like quite well respected in the blockchain space, and they just don't know. And
He spoke at Shelling Point at ETH Denver. He was great.
yeah. Yeah. It was like the same day he was speaking at Shelling Point. I
Yeah.
found, yeah, by someone, I'm not gonna say. Um, but and then like you said before, where there has been sort of this like, yeah, underappreciated thing where like kind of these maybe libertarian minded at first people are like becoming more like, they may in theory believe that they are libertarian and that
Right.
like they believe in free markets or whatever like that, but in practice it is not 100% really the case what they're doing.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, it's like if you just listen to what they're describing collective ownership. So it's like you just have to, you just like nudge them a little bit, and they'll get there, like yeah. Yeah, it's interesting too, like something that, like, as I've been in this space, and I'm actually curious what you think about this, is like on the flip side of that, as a leftist, like for years, my impression basically of like markets, right? Like a market has just always been kind of a dirty word to me, where I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a market that's bad. Um and so I don't know if it's just because now I'm in this space and I'm like, well, is the market like inherently bad, or like,
Mm.
or is there a way, or is like the markets as they exist bad, and it's just a tool, and like there's a way for it to be fine, or whatever. That's maybe the flip side of like a leftist coming around to the idea of markets versus a libertarian coming around to the idea of collective ownership. It's like it's this
Mm.
weird, like, the first person that I really got that from is Glenn Weil from Radical Exchange and all that stuff, where, you know, some of his solutions to things or whatever, or just his like wild ideas about like how to solve problems involving markets. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever so I think before this episode probably comes out, I'll publish an interview that I did with Jaya Claire Brecka, who's like a academic / works at NIM with Harry Halpin's project. And she wrote something in the Agorism journal, Agorism in the 21st Century, that came out. And she talks exactly this about, she calls markets three things I'm probably going to forget, but like markets as a weapon, markets as a tool, and markets as a like gun to my head or something like that. Like, and she talks about openly just sort of like the contradictions, or like the contradictory feelings of that. You know, when you come from a left-wing tradition, a lot of the times the sort of default position, especially in like maybe socialist or communist circles, is that like the markets in general are just bad, or like are just like hugely inefficient. But I think there is this sort of like, it's sort of, yeah, it shouldn't be, but it's sort of like taped over that like markets have existed for like, you know, centuries
Right.
in various forms, but like they don't, of course, like they didn't take the form that they do take today under like a globalized capitalism type of market.
Right.
Which, like, yes, I would say that like handling almost everything as like a capitalist market is a bad thing.
Yes.
But I think that there is sometimes a conflation with like, if I just exchange something, that we're doing market interaction or something. If I trade with someone, like if I don't know, if I trade my Pokemon cards with someone else, and I'm in like the Pokemon card market, and I'm you know, at the whim of the free market, whatever, pushing me around. But like, I don't think that's necessarily like that's. Yeah, sometimes there's like, by taking like such a hard line stance on markets, sometimes that gets conflated as being like the same thing, and that there's a bit of this like, I think, coming from probably I mean, Soviet influence, I guess, is like kind of like a very rationalist type of thinking.
Yeah.
When it comes to the economy, and of course like economic planning. But I think when it comes to a lot of what I think some of the things that Glenn Weil has talked about, although I have some critiques, but I'm not going to go into that. And then like some of the stuff that the different tools that are being built, especially like even like Coordinate that you talked about. Mm-hmm. To me, like, it's, first off, it's not correct, or like it's very limiting if you think of, oh, there's either economic planning and there are markets, and you choose one or the other.
Right.
But I think here what we're seeing is like we're seeing both, where like I think that if we come up with some sort of democratic economic planning, that it will probably look a lot like certain market mechanisms at the same time. Like if I have, I don't know, if we're thinking of like we each get 100 points, and we can sort of decide what we want to make in the economy, and then you know, we get this list of options, you know, and we choose which things we want to pick. Like in some ways it looks like a market, in some ways it's like not really a market, in the way that like, you know, leftists get mad about actually what they're actually mad about.
Right.
So like, to me, I'm seeing this like really weird, you know, Frankenstein mix, where we're kind of potentially building tools around democratic economic planning. And I feel very scared about saying that, because, you know, some academic is going to like be in my messages saying that I'm totally wrong about this or whatever.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the feeling that I'm getting at the moment.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'll be looking forward to read that piece.
Yeah. And then one question I wanted to ask you, just like, how has your life changed since the sale?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Yeah.
Because it went very well, if I understand.
Well. Yeah.
And yeah, I know that before, at least like before COVID, like you were making your money partially through like getting hired for like singing at conferences, or like, you know, making songs for various companies and things like that.
Yep.
Which I from what I understand, some of them you like didn't like doing, and other ones it's like, well, on the other side, you kind of have to if you want to make money.
Yes. So you know, I talked about this at Shelling Point. Like I performed at Shelling Point at East Denver, and the last gig that I did before that, pre-pandemic, was in like bumfuck Texas, a place called Midland, Texas. There's oil rigs as far as the eye can see, and I had taken this gig that I felt like I couldn't turn down. It was like $10,000, you know, and it was for this company that was providing like wastewater, like it was like wastewater, it was like fracking, it was like involved in fracking, basically. It was like instead of using fresh water for your fracking, use this recycled water. Like that was the company. So it was like
green fracking.
Yeah, green fracking. Yeah. And you know, obviously, it's like the thing is, it's like people are nice, right? They're not like evil people or whatever. It's an evil idea. Like I did not support it at all. It was 10 grand. Like I didn't feel like I could not have turned that down. Is the example that I gave. And then there's tons of examples like that. I did gigs for like Novartis, which is like a pharmaceutical company. Come on. Like I'm so anti that, but like I can't turn down 20 grand when like Novartis offers it to me. Like that's the free market, baby. Like there it is.
Well, no. You need to be reliant on like, what do they say? Like, $10 like
Yes,
prints or something like
exactly,
that people
exactly.
say to like
well,
NFT
literally
artists or something.
And so the this was always the dream of NFTs was like oh well, here's just another. And like I said, I never imagined that it would be like a big thing. I thought, like I said, like maybe I could sell each song for $100 or something, and that's like not a ton of money like every month. That's certainly not enough to fully pay my bills, but like that would be helpful. Like that'd be super helpful. So I did this drop, and the drop went amazingly. Like I made a shit ton of money, more money than I've made in 10 years previously. And that has really freed me up to not have to worry about that anymore. But then I'm like worried about all kinds of other things. Like now, and this is just, this is inherent in the space as it exists now. Now it's like, the trade-off to that is like now I as an artist have something called a floor price. Now I have I look at my NFT collection and I can see how people are valuing my songs like just like in no uncertain terms. Like this is how much people value my songs versus other people's things. And I'm like, it's a nightmare almost of thinking about that. It's like, why is this project have a higher floor price than mine? It's like, so that is uncomfortable. That is like not a great feeling. But on the other hand, neither is seeing like low Spotify numbers. It's sort of just like a continuation of something that already exists. In my ideal world, all the language that we use around NFTs would be completely different. All the language that we use in most things in crypto would be completely different. I don't know why we call them wallets. I don't know why we say minting. I don't know why we call it a floor price. I don't even know why that's like a thing that we pay attention to. Like that's all a function not of anything having to do with inherent in art or NFTs. It's completely having to do with speculation. And the fact that all of this came out of money. Like it started. If there's one critique that I completely agree with, it's that the fact that cryptocurrency was the first use of blockchain has, to a large extent, kind of poisoned a lot of things that have come after it, because everything is framed within this currency framework.
Yeah, financial one for sure.
We call it minting because you mint a currency. You don't mint a piece of art. That's never happened before in the history of art making. But that's what we call it because that's just the word that we have for it. And by the way, like we were having these conversations back in the day. Like we were like, okay, we're doing this. We need to come up with better words, everybody. Like we need to come up with like a better language to talk about this stuff so we're not stuck with the stupid language from before. NFTs, even the word non-fungible tokens, what the fuck is that? Like what does that mean?
It's a horrible, it's like the worst. It's so like abstract now that like anything can be an NFT and therefore anybody can use, I mean, just very lazily apply the same critique that they heard about, whatever else.
And as Matt Condon, my co-host, is always fond of saying, like, if you need to explain fungibility, you've already lost, right? Like if you have to explain to people what fungible means, you're already on the losing end of a battle in terms of like language to talk about art or to talk about anything. And then calling them tokens is like even worse. Like what Matt and I still fantasize. We actually have a little Telegram channel devoted to this, of like we fantasize about like having a revolution in the world of NFTs where we sweep out all of this old language, starting with NFTs, and we call them what he always wanted to call them. He's a great namer, and he always wanted to call them DOTs, digital object things. Digital object things.
Nice.
That's it. That's all it is. It's a digital object thing. It's not.
Please add me to this Telegram group.
Yes.
I think it'd be really
It's not anything more. It's not anything less. Just a digital object thing. And yeah, all of these words. So that's just a long-winded way of saying like I feel all of that, I think, a lot more acutely now that I have this big collection and that I'm in the mix in this way that I wasn't before. All of that language is coming down to bear on my psyche in a bigger way than it was before. That's the main downside. That's the upside is the money, which is great. Helps me, helps my family. That's great. The downside is this like weird pressure on my psyche of like this language stuff, like just like constantly bearing down on me.
So what I understand is like every day when you publish a new song, you also tokenize it, and it goes off in an auction for
Yep.
I guess 24 hours or something like that.
Yep, that's it.
And then whoever buys it, the money that they use to purchase it, or the ETH, I guess, goes to like the community pool, I think, or there's like maybe some sort of split immediately. I don't know.
The DAO's treasury,
Okay.
all of it goes to the DAO's treasury.
Okay. And then they own that NFT. I guess, has there ever been a time where like in a day no one bought the song?
Yeah, a couple times a week, no one buys a song at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't have a huge audience. I never have. I try every week to get the songs, but like, a big problem actually of being on ETH is like, we use Zora, great protocol. They have this auction sort of protocol that you can just use. But the problem with it is that when you bid, you have to pay gas every single time you bid. So let's say, and I set the reserve price at like 0.07. So that's like, I don't know, $800 or something like that. It's a lot of money. So just to begin with, that's a lot of money. It cuts out huge portions of people who would want to participate. And then if you want to bid, now you have to pay another like 0.02, 0.03, another like $100 to $300, something like that. That's prohibitive. That's like super prohibitive. I want to get to a place where now, first of all, Zora is working on a module for their auction that will be gasless, which I think will make a huge difference, because I think a lot of people, if you lose the auction, you lose your gas. You just literally wasted $300 to not get something. That's like horrible. So they're doing a gasless auction, and then eventually ETH will get to a point where the fees are going to come down when this thing called sharding, which I think is a horrible word again, when sharding comes to pass, supposedly, hopefully.
Yeah, or if just more people move to like these L2s or in these other.
Yeah, and eventually maybe there's a way that we can migrate everything to an L2 or something like that. So, but even so, the DAO is doing okay financially. We have like enough ETH. We don't have like, crazy amounts of ETH, but we have like enough ETH to do the kinds of things that we're trying to do, to get the kind of things built that we're trying to build.
Nice, interesting. It's yeah, I guess then does the DAO own the NFT that doesn't get bought, I guess? And then
Yes,
you use that for whatever you want.
those NFTs go straight into the DAO's treasury, and those are the ones that we use to give to people who do the thing a day for a month. So it works out in that way. It's like it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's not a waste. Yeah, I think it was interesting that you mentioned, like, again, for someone like maybe Dan or whoever else, sort of like learning about the the issues, I guess, will be like, oh, see, you have this problem that you cannot solve.
Yeah.
Therefore, it is useless. But it's clearly that, like, I don't know, if you just like spend a little bit more than 5 minutes on it, you can like see that there are like options. But anyways.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, no, you like, it is too much money, and the gas fees are dumb, and like all this is true. And but also, like, let's just see what happens. Like, let's play around and do some stuff, and like things will get better, I think,
Yeah. Well, it's been an hour and a half, so I want to thank you so much for taking the time
Yeah,
and
man.
sharing all of this knowledge with us, because yeah, man, it's something that I think deserves a lot more attention, and like I think will elucidate a lot more people's minds on like what exactly is possible with when it comes to DAOs, NFTs, and all these other things, and in a more innovative way, and in a more like, we could say like left-minded way as well, more collective-minded, we can say.
That's my goal, man. Here we are.
So yeah, I guess to finish off, if you want to share with people where they can keep up with you and your work, maybe how they can get involved in the DAO if you want as well.
Yeah, definitely. So SongADAO.world is where the auctions happen every day. I'm on Twitter at SongADAO Man, and I'm very often just like tweeting about things. And find me on Twitter, like DM me at SongADAO Man if you are interested, especially in like joining the DAO, or getting a Song a Day song via this thing a day process that we have. You could do. I don't know when this will come out, so people might miss May because we have we start on the 1st. But if you're hearing this, you can always start on June 1st or July 1st. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, if you're interested, DM me and I'll pass it along to Matt, who heads it up, and we'll get you involved.
Cool, thanks. And then I think to lead out, if I can, I will use the NFT that I purchased.
Good.
To, like as like
what song did you get?
It's a really good one. It's called "Human After All." It's like a super artistic one.
Okay.
It's like I was like, wow, I was like bringing me to tears almost.
Oh, I'm so glad.
It was good.
I'm so glad. That's the best when I hear that people. Yeah, because like I definitely like people. My online persona is very like almost Weird Al-ish, kind of like funny, but like, most of the week I'm writing songs that are like much more low key and from my heart or whatever, and that stuff doesn't get near the attention that it does. But I'm glad, like, more I've heard from more people this way of like, I collected your NFT, I did Precipitating Your Drop, I got a random NFT. I was like, oh, I really like that song. It like means so much to me to hear that. So that's really nice. I appreciate it.
Nice. So we'll outro with that one.
Great. I'll have to go listen to it too, because I don't remember how it goes.
Like a tree, he knows just where you're coming from. He stands before who you will be. I was wrong, I was wrong, I was only human after all. I was wrong, I was wrong, I was only human after all. Beat yourself up for days. Compare yourself to strangers too. The only path you'll ever take is the one that's meant for you. I was right, I was right, I was only human after all. I was right, I was right, I was only human after all. God. So let it come and spend some time sitting next to you and I. Letting it just undermine. I was right, I was wrong, I was only human after all. I was right, I was wrong, I was only human after all. I was right, I was wrong, I was only human after all. I was right, I was wrong, I was only human after all.